Here we are at the end. I've casted the X-Men, the Brotherhood of Mutants. Now it's time to take on those gallery of villains aside from the Brotherhood. I've spent almost the last 2 months casting the X-Men comics, and now it's coming to a close. This will be the final episode before I move on to something new. I have a couple ideas of one-off videos, like casting the Harry Potter founders for a prequel, and maybe 2 videos for Fantastic Four. Those will likely come next, but I'd really like to know what you guys want to see. Now, I did this on a previous video and I like how it worked out. If you like an option, upvote it on my pinned comment on the top. This way it allows for multiple votes and there's no limit on suggestions as well. So let's do that again. Feel free to suggest video games, movies, TV shows, and everything in between. But for now, we're talking about the villains of the X-Men universe. Now, some have appeared on screen before, but were butchered, and some have kind of been shortchanged time and time again. As I have been in the rest of the series, I won't be getting to every single villain that has ever faced the X-Men. If I casted everyone in the X-Men universe, I'd be doing this for almost a year. So instead, I'll be focusing on the ones I'd like to bring to screen, either for the first time, or I'd like to see them again in a different way. I chose to focus on the more prominent fan favorites as well, although I did overlook some like Sebastian Shaw because I really loved Kevin Bacon's take. And I honestly think that First Class is a masterpiece, so I really don't want to touch that character again. So seeing Shaw on screen isn't really needed in my opinion. And I won't be getting to Stryker as well. If I'm honest about that, he's already been done 3 times on screen, and I really don't want to make Wolverine the staple of this franchise like it's been done in the past. So I think the character needs to be put on the sideline. Instead, we'll be focusing on Emma Frost, Mojo, Omega Red, Juggernaut, Mr. Sinister, and Apocalypse. So let's recast the X-Men one last time. First up, we're talking about Emma Frost. Now, I really considered putting her in the normal section for the X-Men, but she's always had more of a complicated relationship with them. I would love for her to start in more of a villainous role before making her way into the X-Men, and eventually becoming a leader. Now, she possesses telepathic powers that can sometimes rival Professor X's. She did also have that secondary mutation, which allows her to go into a diamond-like state. Now, she was portrayed by January Jones in First Class. Now, although I don't think she was bad, the character and the version of it wasn't exactly how I pictured her. We got a little bit of what I think makes Emma Frost stand out, but I've always seen her as more confident and believing that she was above others. I want an actor who can portray that intelligence that I feel like was missing a little bit from Jones's performance. I also want an actor who can really portray her cunning nature and that mystery where she always seems like she has something up her sleeve. She is not afraid to switch alliances like we've seen in the past, so I want to bring that nature of can we trust her throughout the series. Now, with wanting Emma Frost to turn into a leader in the X-Men, I want an actress who has proven that can hold her own. Someone who has screen presence and can bring that gravitas. You don't have to look further than Rosamund Pike. Her in Gone Girl is reason enough to cast her for this character. She plays everything I want Emma Frost to be. She is a little bit on the older side if you want this character to really go throughout a couple films, but her acting ability and her portraying this character is worth it. I don't care if she was 10 years older, she's just perfect for it.
So Amy, who are you?
A, I'm an award-winning scrimshander. B, I'm a moderately influential warlord. C, I write personality quizzes for magazines.
You can see how you would constantly question her character. She can be extremely smooth with her speech and decisions, and be extremely manipulative. In my eyes, she's just made for this role. So Rosamund Pike as Emma Frost. Next up, we have Mojo. Now, I know Mojo is a ridiculous character, but he's also one of my favorites. I love the string of episodes of him in the 90s cartoon and the ridiculous nature of him. He doesn't actually have a spine, which requires some tech to keep him upright, which gives the character a really interesting look. Mojo is essentially a studio executive running a TV show. He pretty much just runs on ratings and has slaves just battle it out. The X-Men usually get mixed up in the series, and Mojo has some fun wreaking havoc. As you'd expect when looking at him, Mojo is crazy and manic. When looking at an actor, it is obvious that we're going to have to go the CGI route, but I'd like to see a little bit more motion capture and some facial movements in order to have this character a little bit more rooted in reality. I think Mark Hamill would be amazing in this role. First off, he isn't afraid of going big and theatrical, and he does have those arsenal of voices from his work as a voice actor. He could really develop something interesting here and bring that lunacy that we need.
You fell for the old sick Joker gag, Batman.
He also has a very interesting face that's a little bit worn and scarred from a car crash back in the 70s. He has that perfect level of crazy for Mojo and can help bring him from a one-dimensional character to something really interesting.
The real reason I tracked you down and groomed you to be the best you could possibly be, Axel. I am your father.
So Mark Hamill as Mojo. Next up we have Omega Red. Omega Red has never appeared on screen before, but now with the Black Widow solo movie and Red Guardian coming to the MCU, it seems natural to have more of the Soviet Union or Russia or what have you. They could have Omega Red be essentially their super soldier mutant. I understand that his powers, although very different, may be compared to Whiplash's, who we saw in Iron Man 2. That may be the reason why he never got really brought to screen. He's actually a lot more than that. He's Russian, he's 6'11", and he's extremely hard to kill. He does have abilities from him being a mutant, but he's also developed more from the Soviet Union and undergoing procedures. He has everything from super strength, durability, reflexes, healing, and of course those tentacle-like tubes that come out of his forearms. Now I think Omega Red may be better suited as a side villain, being a muscle for someone, maybe Ivan the Terrible for the Russian Mafia, but I really would like to see this character on screen. I went with Yuri Kolikolikov, sorry for the pronunciation. His name is not recognizable, or really even easy to say, but you've likely seen him on screen before, either in The Hitman's Bodyguard or The Americans. He's also from Game of Thrones, where he's scarred and in makeup, but really showed me why he'd be great for this role.
Too scrawny. Not like those crows at Castle Black. Think of them stuck in their larders, stuffing their faces with ham and blood sausage and stew, getting nice and fat and marbled.
He is Russian and gets put a little bit in that hole, but I still think he'd be great for Omega Red. So Yuri Kolikolikov as Omega Red. Next up we have Juggernaut. We've seen him on screen before in two completely different ways that are miles apart. Although I didn't like Vinnie Jones in the role, I still love this part for the meme.
I'm the Juggernaut!
Now I can't imagine that the MCU will be touching Juggernaut anytime soon, since he was featured pretty heavily in Deadpool 2. Now the character was portrayed by a little bit of a mashup between Ryan Reynolds and the director, and although I do like the take on the character, it doesn't really allow for much nuance in the role. He's kind of there for one purpose. The character actually has an interesting backstory, with not being a mutant and being the actual stepbrother of Professor X. I don't think I need to break this character down for anyone. He's the Juggernaut. But it is important, if he's going to be the stepbrother of Charles, he needs to be relatively similar in age. Juggernaut should be younger because Charles' mother remarried after the death of his father, but we're looking someone a little bit on the older side. Now this is a change of pace, but I really don't want to recast Juggernaut completely. Instead, I want to give him a face and a performance that could be built upon from Deadpool 2. I want him to have that backstory and really have more for him to stand on. Now, the actor doesn't need to be 9 feet tall or massive. CGI will obviously do the heavy lifting here, as we saw in the character design originally, but he does have to have kind of that build and the face of almost a linebacker. I went with Manu Bennett for this role. He's 50, so it works well with Professor X. He's got the build, he's got that face. He is most well known for playing Deathstroke in the Arrowverse, but I'm looking at the motion capture he did for The Hobbit, where he plays Azog. Say what you want about The Hobbit, but Azog as a menacing character works. Manu brings something to this role that really brings him to life. I actually really enjoy him in the first Hobbit film. It does fall down from there, but he works as a character. You can see the aggression coming through, as well as that voice. He has the physical nature for Juggernaut, and it'd be really interesting to actually bring a face into this character and a backstory. So Manu Bennett as Juggernaut. Next up we have Mr. Sinister. Now, Mr. Sinister has missed his chance to appear on screen so many times. We thought we were getting him after we saw the post-credit scene in X-Men Apocalypse, and then he was actually slated to appear in the post-credit scene of New Mutants. Now, the New Mutants thing may actually happen, and they actually have lined up John Hamm for it, but supposedly that isn't going through. Now, I do like the casting of John Hamm. He is a more than capable actor, and he'd probably kill this role. But if I were going to change it and do my own thing for this, I'd probably go with someone who's from the UK, since this character is supposed to be English, and is actually from the Victorian era. Someone who has that hint of Shakespeare, all while being menacing and engaging. Mr. Sinister was originally a biologist, who, after losing his son, became obsessive and destructive. But after Apocalypse, he becomes much more powerful. Now because of this, I want an actor who can do it all. Be a loving husband, a father, but turned into that supervillain. He needs to be young enough for you to believe that he's a first-time father, but also old enough to buy him as a practicing biologist at the top of his game. Now, I don't think the MCU will go full balls to the wall with this character and match the comics completely. Instead, I think they'll probably take a more grounded approach that has some of its elements. Now, I hope we actually get those changes to the character that Apocalypse makes, but if not, I'd still like to see him on screen with Apocalypse. I feel like a younger Mads Mikkelsen would have been perfect for this role, but unfortunately he is already in the MCU in a major role. Instead, I went with Matthew Goode. He has that nature to portray calm and sweet, or death-staring and menacing. I can also see him in a lab exploring questionable research. He can play Victorian very well, as we've seen in Downton Abbey, in roles like The Imitation Game. He really shines. He has the range to pull off this character, not only being that mastermind who can control the Marauders, but he can be sweet and loving. He has everything in the arsenal for this character, and he can really pull off that transition in both sides.
You're right, though. It's not going to happen immediately tomorrow, but it's already begun. One day there'll be just one species. And at first they won't notice the difference because they've never noticed us, but gradually, eventually they'll come to see that all the magic has seeped out of the world. And they'll look around them, and everyone will be the same.
Now, I know he doesn't look a lot like the main source material, but I've always gone with acting ability over how the character looks, and I think Matt Goode is a really good fit for this character. So Matthew Goode as Mr. Sinister. Lastly, we have the first mutant, Apocalypse. Now, I cannot remember a comic book character that has been this badly cast. Maybe Topher Grace as Venom? Now, I love Oscar Isaac, I really do. Ex Machina and Inside Llewyn Davis are masterpieces. But God, him as Apocalypse it just doesn't work. I just straight up don't think this is the man for the role. Maybe if the design was better, like a lot better, we could take him seriously. But just no. The man is 5'9", and they don't even attempt to do anything with CGI or forced perspective. There is that one sequence where he's a little bit bigger, but other than that, it's just Oscar Isaac in the worst makeup ever. I kind of choose to believe that X-Men Apocalypse doesn't exist. I think I'd honestly rather watch X-Men Origins, but I digress. So what should Apocalypse be, if not Oscar Isaac? He should be a big, dominating mutant. One that stands 7 feet tall. He needs a voice that matches his frame, and that gravitas should be unlike anyone else in this universe. Now, I know it's rather impossible to find an actor who fits this bill, and obviously it does have to be motion capture, with facial performance as well, similar to Thanos, but I still want that actor to shine through and really have that performance. Now, I thought about going down the rabbit hole of having an actor who has the voice, you know, like Keith David or even Christopher Judge, but I honestly think it might be too cartoonish. But the main reason I kind of decided against that is because Apocalypse is Egyptian, something that the X-Men movies just kind of ignored when casting. I tried my best to find an actor who is Middle Eastern, because I think it's important in the upbringing of this character. I want that to shine through both in looks and the voice. I don't want just another Thanos. I want someone who stands on his own and is different. I think Farron Tahir would be really interesting in this role. The man is obviously Middle Eastern, but he has the face, the build, and the voice, as well as the acting ability. He hasn't really had a breakout role in Hollywood and is more well known for his stage performances, but just check out the gravitas he brings in such a small scene.
So aside from your freedom, what else can I give you?
I want the guards to leave my people alone. The Holy Quran. I want one in my cell. And I want to say the name of Allah and the Prophet Muhammad in the open air. I want to be seen by my God. And I say my evening prayers.
He has everything I really want to see in this character. I love that his voice is low and raspy, but also has that Middle Eastern feel coming through. His face and his build could be amplified even more to meet Apocalypse, but honestly, he has the look already. It'd be like Josh Brolin and Thanos. Take what's already there and build upon it. Now, I should mention I did break one rule for this, because Farron Tahir is actually already in the MCU. He did briefly appear in Iron Man, but I debated it's in such a minor role that it doesn't really matter and fans would largely forget. Plus, Farron would actually be heavily altered in this role and be pretty much unrecognizable. He has had such a long career in very diverse roles. I have no doubt that he'd actually have a really interesting take on this character and put the time and work into it. He's sometimes an actor who gets defined by the color of his skin and doesn't get to show off his full potential, so I'd really love to see him in a role this massive. So Farron Tahir as Apocalypse. So there are my X-Men villains. As always, let me know your picks in the comments below. I always love reading them. And let me know what you'd like to see next in that pinned comment on the top. Thank you guys for watching these recasting videos. I know there are a lot of parts and it's a lot of me just talking, but I do appreciate you guys watching them and commenting. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate you subscribing so you don't miss out on the next series. As always, thank you so much to my patrons: Adam Gray, Jeremy Jacobs, Jenny Edwards, Gabe Marchand, Gunnar Legland, Colleen West, Marco Perry, Roland, Aidan McShane, Shalon Hudson, Kieran Hunt, Joris Conan, Brandon Warner, Suivia, Alex Tao, Derek B. Bell, Jacob Wolf, Alexander Gardulo, Lisa Hewitt, Rachel Kilker, James Rogers, Archie Steffen, and newcomer Gregor Davidson. Thank you for your support, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.